Tony D and Little Joan here with a rant against fan fiction. Okay, we've got to talk about what fan fiction is doing to media. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books, links in the description. Comedy Horror in South Jersey. It's the Pineys. Books 1 through 10. Available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. Okay. So, Tom Taylor. Oh, well, why would you associate him with fan fiction, I wonder? Well, this is fan fiction to me. When you have Nightwing and Batgirl getting married. This is the kind of story structurally, if you intend your comic to continue in a way that makes sense, you should never do. And what fan fiction has done in general is it has turned into something it never should have been. Now, if you're a kid, like I was, I did fan fiction, my own version of it. It wasn't officially fan fiction. I didn't show it to anybody. I hope it still isn't in the attic somewhere. But it's practice for the most part. If you're a kid, or even if you're just getting in to writing screenplays, books, stories, whatever, it's practice. And one of the ways you can practice, for instance, you may be a huge Harry Potter fan, and I know there are many of you out there. And you may say, you know what, I've always had this idea for a Harry Potter short story. I've never written a short story before, let me write it. And you write it as practice to sort of get in the mode of what a story is. And there's nothing wrong with the practice. There's nothing wrong with doing that. From a pragmatic standpoint, it gives you some amount of experience that you can build upon. The other thing that's sort of fan fiction, but not really, I've talked about it before, is if you want to write episodes of a TV show, like actual episodes of a TV show, you typically, for a screenwriter, you would do what's called a spec screenplay of the most popular show on the air. Usually in the genre you want to be hired in, right? The only show that really looked at outside writers technically was Star Trek. That was it. So I had spec screenplays for Married with Children, Moonlighting, really dating myself here, Simpsons. I think I did do a Next Generation script. I forget what else, maybe one or two others. But that was to show potential bosses that I understood the format, that I understood things like page length. Format being the most important when you're writing a screenplay, as I've said before. Got to be in the format. Because it's all about the timing, especially for television. So there's nothing wrong with those two versions. And it's not really fanfic when you write your screenplay for the next generation. You're not going to write something that is off the rails where all the characters have graphic sex on the bridge of the Enterprise. You might think that is somehow appealing to the current crop of morons who run the studios, but trust me, they're not going to produce that. Now they might do it on streaming apparently and in comic books, but yeah, usually not on network television. The reason you don't go down this path creatively very long is because it's poisonous. It's poisonous because you end up wallowing in or luxuriating in the stories that you can't tell. You can't marry off Nightwing and Batgirl. You can't. I mean, you can in an imaginary story. DC used to do that all the time, and it would give you a glimpse into what that world would be like. But there was a reason they only did it as a fantasy story for one issue, because they knew it was a dead end. That's the end of the story right there. That's the end of the movie. Nightwing and Batgirl go on a long adventure and throw the Joker and all the Batman villains back into Arkham, and at the end, they retire, get married, have kids, the end. That's the end of the story, which is why you don't do it. Other shows that I feel are wallowing in fan fiction. Here's one right here: Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn's so off the rails, I can't even classify it as what I just said about Nightwing and Batgirl, because at least that's an ending. At least that's an ending you want to see. Harley Quinn and the Poison Ivy thing is just basically like pornified fanfic. It's late stage fanfic. It's like, oh, what if we have all the characters have sex with each other, and not just like regular sex, like gay sex and S&M and like all kinds of crazy sex, all kinds of crazy kinky sex. There is an infinitesimal sized audience for this. And you might say, well, it's in its 4th season. What are you saying? I'm saying the audience is very, very small. The streaming services haven't exactly pinpointed major audiences. In case you don't know, they're going down the tubes faster than I don't know, Drano down a drain. I'm too annoyed at fanfic to come up with hilarious analogies at this moment. But what I'm saying is, like, I was going to do a video on this trailer. It's called Harley Quinn, a very problematic Valentine's Day special. But this is one of the examples of fanfic, in my view. Because if you were going to do comedy based in the world of Gotham City and the villains and Batman or whatever, you would first start with what the status quo is. And the status quo in Gotham is not this. The status quo is something like Harley and Poison Ivy are criminals who occasionally shack up together. Harley's entire character trait was she has a weakness for the Joker. She has a complete, utter weakness for the Joker. And that's what made her interesting. She seems pretty capable as one of the crazy villains against Batman, except she has this huge, huge blind spot when it comes to the clown prince of crime. Poison Ivy, they've just completely ignored her origin story. Poison Ivy was never a character that even worked with the other villains. They've completely rewritten her as a lesbian. In the comics, she's an overweight lesbian. Yeah, because wokeness. So this entire TV show is fan fiction in my view. The entire concept, the entire pitch. Because it's just a fantasy. 2 hot lesbian girls running amok in a city together with superpowers and having tons of sex. And then in this one, when they have sex, it makes everybody else have sex. It makes their degeneracy somehow look better. And I don't use the term degeneracy lightly. Some people watch my videos. Oh, you're another Jesus freak. You're such a prude. Honestly, I'm not. Honestly, I'm not. Honestly, I was the guy back in the 80s and 90s writing outrageous stuff. Stuff that people at the studio would go, no, this is too much, man. You're crazy. Another crazy comedian sending me crazy scripts. But there is a limit to what you can do. There's a limit. Once you pass these limits, you start to alienate your audience. So in the case of Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, who is this show for? Who is Harley Quinn, a problematic Valentine's Day special, for? Well, okay, you could say, let's start with the comic book geeks. Okay, that's a good place to start. How many people do you think that is? Last time I tallied it up, you might, maybe, have anywhere from 250,000 to 500,000 people. Maybe. And that would be the hardcore readers. And you might say, well, that seems low. Oh no, that's pretty high in the United States. Have you seen comic book sales? It's pretty damn low. Mostly because they keep jamming all this wokeness down everybody's throat. But it was never very high to begin with. The highest selling comic of all time is technically, I believe it's X-Men #1 with 8.1 million copies. Now, they had 5 covers. And everybody at that point in time was buying at least 2 copies of everything. So do the math on that. you're probably looking at really about 800,000 people at the peak of comics. Spawn number one, something like 3.2 million. And I worked for a guy who used to sell Spawn number ones by the pound to get rid of them. So, again, you might be looking at this late date, 250K to 500K in terms of a fan base just for comics. You go to cartoons. Well, it doesn't get much rosier. You could say, well, there's millions of people who watch The Simpsons. That's The Simpsons. It's been on 30 years. That's a different deal entirely. It came out on a live action show called The Tracy Ullman Show. And then, even then, it nearly dropped off the face of the earth when it went and did its own show. The fact that Fox was primetime and a little edgier, it gave it a chance to grow, and it did, and it became a big hit. But most cartoons struggle. They struggle, and they have to show them 10 times to make any money. I have a friend, he's a cinematographer. He hates cartoons. And he's in the industry. He watches everything. He won't watch cartoons, though. He wouldn't even watch Up when I recommended it. So there are people who just don't watch cartoons. So how many can you pull out of that number? Well, you'd have to look at the people who watch cartoons in a broad sense and then compare that to the kinds of people who might watch something like this. So a lot of cartoon watchers are kids. Oh, sorry, this is an adult cartoon. It's on HBO Max and it's extremely adult. I mean, it's borderline softcore. So kids, they're pretty much out unless they're sneaking a peek and, behind their parents' back. That eliminates probably the majority of the audience for cartoons, at least in terms of the studio's position and the people who market this stuff. Cartoons, okay, so now you've got grown adults who watch cartoons. So maybe you pull in the Simpsons fans, maybe, and Bob's Burgers, but this show is so rough. It's dirty, it's vulgar. It's not like the Simpsons and Bob's Burgers, which is relatively wholesome by comparison. So you lose a good portion of the audience there. Let's just be generous and say, maybe you pick up 2 million people. So at best, this show could appeal to maybe 2.5 million people. Maybe. Now, are they all going to watch it? Oh, no. That's just the people who have the potential to bring in. The people who could watch it if they know about it, if they have HBO Max, and if they bother to do it. They don't have something better to do with their lives, which I assure you they do. Now, on top of everything else, it wallows in fan fiction. This isn't just about Harley's and Poison Ivy's gay romance, which wasn't even canon, and now they're just trying to jam it down everybody's throats. It's also about a bunch of crazy amount of sex. There's sex in the background of the scene. Because the hilarious thing is, Harley gets off Poison Ivy so hard that she has some kind of explosion of spores, because now instead of being a normal person with slightly odd quirks that fights the Batman, she's some sort of superpowered plant girl mutant that can do that. Even though that's, again, not part of the canon, not part of her character, and just a bunch of crazy nonsense they made up specifically for this version of the characters, just so they can do this episode, essentially. Which is a special, not an episode. Basically a long episode, I'm assuming. And then, so what are they doing with this story? Well, they're kind of doing the same thing the woke do with gender ideology. Even though it's woke, that's not the main focus. The main focus, and this is a problem in fanfic, it degenerates into porn. You substitute sex for a story. But is it a story? Not really. What you're doing is you're standing on the shoulders of the people who created these characters and built them up, and then you're having the characters have degenerate sex, and it has some amount of weight to you because the characters, not because anything you wrote. Anybody can take characters and make them have a bunch of degenerate sex and talk vulgarly and run around and do stuff they wouldn't normally do. And it would seem like it's a cool, innovative thing, but it's not. Because you didn't create these characters. You didn't establish the universe in which they exist. You didn't create anything. All you did was take a car, smash it up, and say, see how I improved the car? Wow, the car's sure smashed up. That's what this is. It's a car crash. And that's what fan fiction is, if you take it seriously. Now, if you don't take it seriously, or if you use it as a practice, or, as I stated, with a spec script, that's different. But this isn't even professional, in my view. It's off-brand, it's out of character, and it's not particularly challenging story. Having the characters just have a bunch of sex and see what happens, yeah, that's not the DC universe. That is pretty much the very definition of fan fiction these days. It's mostly just porn. And it goes back to, hell, the 70s. This stuff used to float around conventions. Yeah, Spock and Kirk. Ugh. Lord of the Rings. Ugh. Gross stuff. Gross stuff. Who was writing it? Well, it was a tiny percentage of the nerd audience. The perverted percentage. The ones that were so into their erotica that they thought they'd take it public because other people might be interested in it too. And there were twos of perverted people who, I guess, get off on this. But it's not meant to be public. I mean, if you want to do that stuff, that's your business. I don't care. But to put it on a screen and expect people to watch it, to expect to expand the universe in some way, this doesn't do anything to expand the universe of DC, of the characters, of the brand at all. This does the exact opposite. It alienates people. Because anybody who watched the 92 cartoon where Harley Quinn is reintroduced knows that, well, that cartoon could have been watched by anybody. It was good for adults. It was, kids could watch it. It was a little, for real little kids, it might have been a little rough, but for the most part, it's an all ages show that was finely crafted. This, you take the audience from that and then turn it into this, you can only take away. You can't add. So what are you accomplishing? How are you bettering this product? You're not. How are you separating yourself as an artist from the work? You're not. You are just resting on the laurels of the previous creators and deconstructing and degenerating their creations. This is not the way Harley acts. It's not the way Poison Ivy acts. Velma, same deal. Same deal. Again, more sex. Throwing in the drugs. And the sad part, really sad part about this, Adult Swim already did this. But they at least did it in sort of a subtle ha-ha-ha way, like, nah, you don't see it, but, you know, the subtext is there. So they played on the subtext a little bit and had Shaggy and Scooby in the van getting high, but you don't really see them get high. You just see the smoke and you hear them giggling. Or that Fred kept leaving with Daphne, but you don't see what they're doing, but it's kind of implied. And I don't mean on the regular cartoons. I mean on like the Adult Swim like bumpers that they did for a while. And I think that's fine because you've got plausible deniability there. The kids would be like, wait a minute. But they wouldn't really necessarily destroy the characters. You could always say, you could always cut to the van opening and Scooby and Shaggy are just eating while they're burning incense, and you can cut to Fred and Daphne and they're just playing Parcheesi. With Velma, there's no question what's going on. I mean, on top of the race swapping, which is wholly unnecessary and stupid, you have a bunch of jokes that don't really land because, again, as I said in my review of Velma, there's no place for them to land. There's no reality for them to work. What was concrete in the DC universe was the world and Gotham. What was concrete in the Scooby universe was only the characters. See, they were traveling hippies in a van, solving mysteries. So they never really had a place to go other than the malt shop, which we almost never saw. um, they're trying to introduce this foundation, and the foundation for your character is the most important thing you could possibly introduce. These guys, in my view, rank amateurs. These guys aren't even good enough to write for Tumblr. Um, they they just aren't making anything make sense. They could have set up jokes. They could have set up things that would have made those jokes land, but they're not. They're too busy trying to say, hey, aren't we clever? Look at this outrageous show we created. It's so outrageous. By the way, did we mention we're outrageous and we're pissing everybody off? Yeah, that's kind of important to comedy to a certain extent. It's usually a metric that you are kind of doing the right thing, but it's who do you piss off is the question. And the people you should be pissing off, former hippies, is the establishment. Did the establishment come out and say, the show is outrageous, film is terrible? Oh, no. The establishment keeps defending this show. The establishment desperately wants you to believe, no, the show is still good, no. Brown Velma gets hate in Scooby-Doo spinoff, but not for the reasons you think. Does that sound like an establishment guy saying, oh, God, this terrible show, get it off the air? If this upset the establishment, CNN would be talking about it, and MSNBC would be screeching about it. Joe Biden would come out and make a statement about it. And you might say, oh, that's ridiculous. Joe Biden wouldn't make a statement about that. Dan Quayle came out with a statement about Murphy Brown. I believe it was one of the Bush presidents came out with a statement about The Simpsons. Made some snide comment like, oh, we're more like the Waltons and not like the Simpsons. Yeah, that lets you know your work is actually doing something. Because the right people were mildly offended by those characters. I worked for the Simpsons comics. I was originally hired because they were going to do a comic strip in the newspapers. But the newspaper syndication seemed to imply that the Simpsons were a little too risque for the newspapers. Yeah, how's that working out for you, by the way? So that tells you where the Simpsons were at that time when they were new. They were going after a lot of sacred cows, a lot of establishment people. This show is being defended nonstop by the establishment. So is Harley Quinn when they bother to even talk about it. The media establishment will defend a show like that. Who defends Nightwing marries Batgirl? Well, the comic book establishment does. And those are the guys you want to piss off. CBR are the guys you want to piss off. Screen Rant are the guys you want to piss off. To some extent, the AV Club and the Onion you want to piss off. Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Deadline. Those are the guys you want to piss off. You have to know where the zeitgeist is. I don't think these guys do. And here's the old zeitgeist. This is Madonna pulling her, oh, look at me, doing crazy religious stuff. I'm the Virgin Mary. Everybody get pissed off at me. I got a bikini on from the neck down. No, she didn't have that. I wouldn't put it past her, though. So this is Vanity Fair. For those of you who are, the kids really are digging the magazines today, aren't they? I talked about this in Hollywoke Hot Take, but this is another example. This is the old way of pissing everybody off. They would piss off religion. And to a certain extent, the Catholic Church was a good target because it deserved to be, shamed for their hypocritical behavior. To some extent, they still do. Although now they've got a communist pope, so I don't see how you're going to pillory him. So this just seems gratuitous at this point. Plus, it's Madonna. But and her airbrushed face, I think. But this is, again, fanfic. You could have written Madonna fanfic, right? It'd be easy. Madonna meets some cute guy at a church so she can go make out in the confessional booth because that's blasphemy, baby. Um, Meanwhile, this is what the establishment does. Hogwarts Legacy doesn't care if you use unforgivable curses. Sounds like a Harry Potter game will let you wreak havoc with little consequences. Kotaku, the establishment video game media, I would say. So, they've done everything but come openly to defend canceling the game due to transphobia. It's a video game. It has nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that. Whatever you think of J.K. Rowling, it's just a game. It's just a game. But, you've got all these people screaming about the game, but they're in the establishment. They're supporting the establishment's talking point. They're not supporting the people who maybe actually are trans, let's say. They're not supporting people who maybe have other issues that get roped into that sort of world. They're just screaming about a video game. And this kind of fanfic leads to this sort of thinking. I got to think the right way, or I'm doing the wrong thing. And you might say, well, aren't you saying that fanfic is the wrong thing? I'm saying that fanfic has its place. It's not in public. It's not anything than what it is. A fantasy by people who aren't really serious about writing stories and crafting something good. They're deluding themselves by playing in the sandboxes of other people's work. This is a way in video games you bring about cool stuff. You bring back the old developers and the video game Tactics Ogre, and you do another version of the game or a sequel. I don't know. That's the way you do it. That's not fanfic, because the guys who worked on it are starting it. The fans are developing it in the realm in a professional manner. They're doing it in a professional manner. Now you could say, well, their work in fanfic video gaming got them to this point. You may be right. You may be right on that. And that can happen in certain instances because they always need coders. They always need artists. Artists do a lot of fanfic in the comic book world. They draw superheroes again and again and again and again and again. They draw sample pages again and again. They do commissions, which you got to be careful with. Can't get too greedy with those commissions. But you should be striving towards original content too. Again, it's practice. It's practice, practice, practice. This is the proper way to use the old stuff. This is the original Flash from the 90s being brought back to play the old Flash alongside the current Flash in the CW and the final episode of this. This is the way to do it. And so it's not like fanfic has no place. But it's very damaging if you wallow in it. And the sexual stuff, the stories that you shouldn't be telling, that end the story. I mean, here's another kind of fanfic. Everybody dies. Right? Hey, I wrote this great Star Trek story. Kirk kills everybody. Or gets everybody killed in this amazing away mission. Would it be exciting? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. To see everybody's death? Be the most exciting thing ever. God, why won't they buy my script? Because you killed everybody? Because everybody's dead? Except maybe Kirk, because Kirk can never die. We all know that. You can't do those stories. Functionally, they just don't work. Now, there are ways to do them or give people a glimpse of them, you can do, again, a fantasy story, an alternate universe story, as they sort of alluded to in Star Trek with Mirror Mirror, OG Star Trek. You could have even done a story in which they go to an alternate universe where the characters are killed or never existed, or see a future where they're killed. You can do that as long as your original characters are intact, because that's the whole point of the story. The whole point of the story is the characters should survive until they get the ending they should get. You know, for The Flash, the ending was Crisis on Infinite Earths. If you haven't read it, well, you should. It's pretty cool. And how the Flash goes out is exactly how you'd expect the Flash to go out. Running faster than he's ever run before. How would Superman go out? Saving the Earth. Saving Lois Lane. Saving everybody. One last time. How would Batman go out? Same deal. Because they're heroes, and that's the way heroes go out. Fanfic guys don't really grasp that. And it's fine, again, to play around in that sandbox. But until you learn the real rules, if you're not learning the real rules, if you're not striving to do original stuff or to be professional and understand what the professional stuff is, and I don't even mean necessarily from money standpoint, right? This isn't all about money, although money is a measurement, to be sure. It's about creating something that adds. In improv, we say yes and. You accept what's gone before and you add to it. You cannot accept what's gone before and then deny it. You cannot just deny it either. You cannot say, oh, well, Harley's not that way. We're going to make her this way. No. That's saying no. When you're doing creative stuff, you must say yes. Yes. Yes, this is the way Harley was. And we will add to that. We will add more and make Harley more interesting. By saying no, you take away. By saying no, you simply make a copy that isn't as good. Because nothing ever beats the original. 9 times out of 10. Once in a while you get a weird aberration. Some half-ass comic like the X-Men that wasn't really popular to begin with, and then a guy comes in and fixes it. But how did Chris Claremont fix the X-Men? Did he start out by saying, well, you know everything you know about the X-Men, forget about it? No. What he did was he added to it. He clarified the relationships. He added more characters. And once he did, it got better and better. And he never denied the reality that had started. He could have. He could have said, well, you know, that was one version of the X-Men. Here's mine. Oh, and forget everything that's gone before. No, he added to it. And fanfic people kind of just don't get that, a lot of them. At least the ones that wallow in it. They think, well, I can do whatever I want. You can. But don't delude yourself. You're not really writing anything good. You are standing on the shoulders of giants and saying, look how tall I am. But you're not tall, because you have to stand alone with this stuff. Your stuff has to be able to be on its own. You have to be able to strip away all the nonsense out of your story and still say, well, this could still be a good story. I can strip away all the supernatural stuff out of the Pineys, and I can still write you a good story with the same characters. In fact, I was trying to think the other day, should I do an entire book of the Pineys where they actually don't fight anything supernatural? That would be kind of cool. Because I have enough, there's enough to them to give them that impetus. I don't know if I'm going to do that. I have to think about that more. I still have to tie it into South Jersey. That's part of the theme. Anyhow, if you're not doing that, if you, for instance, if you stripped away everything in this story that was Gotham City, DC Comics, Harley Quinn, Poison Ivy, stripped away the superpowers, would you even have a story? No, I don't think so. I think you'd have a story about 2 wacky lesbians who probably should be arrested because of their crimes. And then they have a bunch of sex. It would probably be insanely boring. So that's the problem with fanfic. It blinds you to the stuff you really need to do. You really need story structure. You need characters. A character has to go on a journey, and it has to be Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Essentially. Not always. In prose, it's a little different. But certainly in TV shows and movies, yes, Act 1, 2, and 3. You don't have it? What do you have? Essentially, you have a bunch of literary masturbating. And I don't say that knocking you fanfic guys. I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for this. Look, what I'm saying to you, if you're putting your talent and effort, and you're saying, oh, my story's good, though. Even if I strip that away, it's a good story. Well, you're wasting your talent then on somebody else's creations. Change the names, change up the background, change it all, so you can have your own characters. Or my recommendation would be to start fresh. You know, you could always do a similar story. You probably will end up doing similar stories you like to do with characters you kind of like to write. It's kind of the way it rolls out anyway. But after you've gotten all you can out of fan fiction, get the hell out of it. And for God's sakes, don't publish it. And that's it for me, Tony D and Little Joan. Check us out on Odysee, Bitchute, and Rumble for our more bass takes. If you can get more bass take it. I'll be at the Blue Rascal Distillery on Sunday, and I'll be talking about the Pineys. If you want to yell at me in person, I'll be there from 4 to 6. Hope to see you in Hamilton, and we'll see you